Hi, everyone. I'm Pip from Seymour Digital Media. You're listening to Know How Marketing Lab podcast. This podcast brings together different experts in marketing from our Facebook group, Cyberpunk Geeks Marketing Mixer. Each week, we get on here and we talk about something search marketing like Google Ads or SEO, social media marketing from Facebook to TikTok, or website marketing. If you're a marketer or aspiring marketer, a business owner or entrepreneur, this podcast for you. We're going to share the best SEO, search, social, and website strategies. We share tips and hacks, Google Ads strategies, what's going on in the current market. Each week, we discuss something exciting and awesome in marketing. So welcome, Greg. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Greg with Original 72 Creative, and we're a full-service website graphic design and digital marketing firm in Vancouver.
And I am Rina Little from Little Works Indie Media, also a marketing agency in Vancouver. And welcome to our topic, popular designs and trends in websites. So,
Yes,
yay! I feel like we just need to really jump in and get it out.
pretty much.
Hopefully,
Now
if
that
you're
we only
joining,
have 15 minutes,
I know. Very short topic. All right,
we
Greg,
can,
why don't you jump right in and tell us what you're noticing for trends this year?
yeah, so typically trends are for year over year, they'll, be something that starts in the previous year and sort of continue and pick up steam in the new year. So last year there was a start of a design trend to almost go back to like Y2K 90s type designs, which were some of the things with that type of a design is like older style fonts, Y2K fonts. You're seeing a lot more sort of almost text based designs, right? Because
Yeah.
in the early days of web development, graphics weren't as easy to produce, and so there are some sites that are trending more towards sort of a text base and using different unique fonts and things like that, that give you that nostalgic feel of 90s and 2K type of a design. Have you come across much of that in
Definitely.
you've looked at?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, we looked at some stuff online on Tuesday, and definitely there is a move towards that. What I'm noticing, and this is a continuation from the last couple of years, is that people are moving away from doing the hero image style. So the hero image is when you have a banner at the top. I mean, if you're doing e-commerce and things like that, then it makes sense to continue with that, where you can highlight your new collections or your sales or promotions or whatever you're doing. For other kinds of businesses, it's kind of wasted space sometimes when you
Hmm.
consider what they're doing. So you have to really think about. There are a couple of things that I want to talk about before we get into are the trends. But when you think about whether or not you want to be part of the trends, I started a couple of new website projects recently, and both of these things came up. Someone had done some Googling and looked up, what's hot for website design. And if you're not a trendy company, then following the trends is not necessarily a great idea, because if you're a trendy company, then you have to stay ahead of the trends, which means you're changing up your website more frequently than most. Marketing companies will be doing that sometimes. Design companies will be doing that often. Other kind of, you know, I don't know what else to say. Like anything that's sort of fashion oriented or anything like that would be either focusing on highlighting their items that are for sale, but or they're highlighting, that they're at the up curve, the beginning curve of the design life cycle. And so if your branding isn't about being trendy, then you want to be careful, because there are a couple of trends that last. So for example, that sort of millennial pink that came out a while back, and then it stuck around on Twitter and on websites for quite some time. But you take a gamble, because some things just come and go, like the lime green thing. That didn't last very long, I don't think. And things like that, fonts, unusual fonts. There was like that one Nito font that I actually really liked too. It was a very long font where the letters were super long, and then the little connectors were higher up. That
Hmm.
came out, and then all of a sudden you saw it everywhere. It was like everywhere you saw it. And then when you see it everywhere, then it's a place where you might not want it as part of your brand anymore. And a brand should be fairly unique in some ways, so you don't really, you want to use things that are actually going to last over a little bit of time if
Hmm.
you are a timeless company. So, clinics and massage therapists and things like that. You want people to feel, you want to think about, what do I want my people to feel? And your developer, designer, or whoever you're working with should be, organizing your brand. So you don't want the hottest thing if your brand is about being authoritative and friendly and classic, like you're trying to create that experience, then you don't really want anything that's too trendy. And the other thing, so that's point number one. And point number two is, and this is what came out of the discussion that you and I had the other day, is that with all of these sort of busier styles, which included font and a lot of background imagery and things like that, accessibility came into question. I looked at some of those designs and thought to myself, oh, that's not really going to pair well for accessibility. And accessibility is one of Google's big focuses now, and it's also a focus that a lot of governments are getting into. So in British Columbia and Ontario, you have to make your website accessible. Accessible design is a big thing.
Hmm.
So are we going to follow that exact trend? Maybe not. I mean, we could have employ some of the aspects, but we want to really look at what we're doing long term, because most people want a website, and in fact most people expect their website to last forever. you know, or a very long time. They don't realize that the technology needs to be replaced or updated. And that you can still see the HTML ones that were made like 20 years ago. They're like shrinking and shrinking and shrinking
Yeah.
as the
Yeah.
resolution gets better and better. And they're not really quite cluing into that's what's happening to their site.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you have to think about longevity, what you're trying to do, what you want to say, all of those things need to come into it. All right, so so you brought up font and then I hijacked. So let's talk about some of the other aspects.
Yeah, well, you mentioned in your discussion there about the overstimulation graph type of a graphic, and while I agree with you that obviously websites need to make sure they still focus on accessibility, which is becoming bigger and bigger right now, the the design of the site might not necessarily be overstimulation, but the graphics used on the site would be overstimulation. So the site itself can still be accessible. It's just that
Yes.
the graphics that they're using on it that
Yeah.
you would basically describe for accessibility are really
Well,
sort of overstimulation and like words and text everywhere and stuff like that. It's not like you're building a site that is not accessible
well,
because you have weird things all over the place.
yes, but I do want to put in a caveat that is possible, and you're absolutely right. A lot of people actually, in fact, I'm thinking of one client in particular where the job didn't really go so smoothly. It was mostly because when we design a site, we design using elements for the site. So if you don't provide the elements to the designer and it's out of scope for your site, and your site is only going to look as good as imagery that you provide.
Mm,
However, having said that, and I do understand what you're saying, but you're thinking of accessibility in one very particular, it seems like you might be thinking of it in a particularly narrow way where you're going to describe the imagery and then somebody's going to use a reader. But there are many people out there who are visually impaired but not completely blind, and they're not using readers. So I'm thinking of like our aging population. And secondly, here's 2 points. So if you have like what we were looking at, and we'll put some of these examples in the comments below for everyone to see, but one of the things that I was looking at was a very busy image. So what it had was it was a black on red image. So the background was red, and then all the graphics were black, and then the text was black, and the text in the graphic, there wasn't there wasn't any nice space around the text to protect it from the graphics. So it was overlaying. And that's what's going to be problematic for people with that are just sight impaired. They don't really need accessibility in the terms of they're not disabled, but they're going to have a harder time like pulling that background from foreground out. And also black on red, if you have issues with color, seeing color, black on red is going to look like totally black because red is black when you put it through a photocopier. Have you ever done that? Like you have to look at that aspect too. And then thirdly, how the heck do you describe those images? You said weird images. You can't put weird image in the alt text, right? So how do
Yeah, I
you
mean,
describe
you're
those
gonna
images?
obviously you're gonna describe that image for, the context of what you're trying to get across
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
image, right? But
Yeah.
you're using like a super convoluted graphic design process to make it as fun as possible. Again, I understand what you're talking about, but again, from the score of a accessibility factor, it's still a graphic, and you can make your graphics look however you want. The reader or the scoring system that says if a site is accessible or not, I don't think is currently able to process the
Sure.
graphic itself and understand whether what that graphic is accessible or not. So it's really just a
Sure.
a, a portion of whatever that company's design brand is, but we
Yeah.
would all obviously always try to err on people making it as easy as possible for people to look at
Exactly.
and
But
get the context of.
okay, so having your website assessed by an accessibility software is not how it's completely done too. Like part of it is done that way. The other part of it is actually done by humans. So a high contrast between text and background is super important. You can't just put whatever images you want up. So I think that that is, I mean, otherwise you're not really designing for accessibility. And you should have seen in one of my groups, the designer, there was an inaccessible poster that got put into a Facebook group the other day, and the person who posted was crucified. And it has nothing to do with what, you know what I mean? Like it's really about how we look at the image, not what how the image is described, because the poster had done the exact right thing. When you have an inaccessible design, they created the text above to describe the image below, which was perfect. That's exactly what is expected, professionally speaking. And still, she was absolutely roasted for posting a poster like that. So we have to really look at it from a design part two, the imagery. Just because Google can't understand the images, and just because without text, and just because the software can't, doesn't mean that humans are going to be fine with it, you know?
Mhm.
So I feel pretty strongly about that because I'm thinking about the human experience, the user experience of the sites too. So some of them were really hard. I think not all of them were, but that one with the red and the black, and I'm like, oh, that's just going to be a nightmare. And we have to preface the other thing is we're not obsessed with accessibility only because we want to be accessible and inclusive for people, but Google is rating us, so it affects our SEO. And basically, if you can't motivate a business owner to accommodate disabled people, you're going to motivate them through improved SEO. That's the idea.
Staying on the graphics line of things, we're seeing a lot more 3D illustrations,
Yeah.
graphics with multiple levels or dimensions in them, whether they be sort of more real looking or sort of flat design, but expanding that flat design to make it feel like it has three-dimensional levels is
Yeah.
also a new trend, or not, maybe not a new trend, but where things are starting to move into as well.
Want to know more about SEO? We've got a class for that. Our mission is to educate students about the right tools, techniques, and strategies to grow their businesses using the most up to date search engine marketing optimization techniques and tools Find out more at knowhowmarketinglab.com.
Yeah, seeing that more and more. I mean, they went through a whole process. Do you remember when Google and some of the other companies took that 3D-ness out of their logos?
Hmm.
It was about, I don't remember what year that was, but they all went through a process of removing it and flattening their logos. And now
Yeah.
it seems like the youth, especially, are really, young brands are really interested in putting that back in. And I loved, I we saw claymation graphics on sites, and we're seeing, like, I saw a designer the other day do this, like the little edges are hatched so that it does make it look like it's popping out. So that's
Right.
pretty interesting. I love that, and that is definitely new and old all at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the claymorphism
No?
push right now. I just find it very awkward and childish.
Yeah, I think again, you have to go back to that. What is your brand? What is your brand saying before you can actually adopt any of that stuff in?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it is a good time to sort of think about, did I get everything flattened out on my site? Is that the kind of site that I have? And then if I wanted to update my brand and make it look a little bit more relevant, what kind of aspects could I add to my current site to sort of bring it more up with the times? And branding can be updated regularly. Like, you don't have to wait 5 years for your brand to get super old looking before you update. In fact, one of my favorite examples is the Royal Bank and their logo. They update regularly, and we don't really
Mm.
perceive a huge difference every iteration. So it might just be like updating your font and updating the color slightly, and maybe taking those, sometimes you take the edges off the corners, sometimes you add the edges back on the corners. And, in this case, you could add a little bit of a bump.
Yeah, I for a long time was very against any modifications to your logo
Oh,
uh,
yeah?
or branding. And I'm starting to come around more to the idea of being able to play around with it in ways that the logo basically looks the same, but there is very slight adjustments. Like
Yeah.
maybe it looks a little bit more three dimensional, or maybe
Yeah.
there's like there's some very slight difference, but it really, like, it's the same color, it's the same logo itself, and
Oh,
people
I'll
will
see if
recognize it, but there's
yeah.
just sort of a playfulness with it.
Yeah. I'll see if I can find the Royal Bank example. I did a blog article on it a few years ago, and you would think that the Royal Bank blue has been the same Royal Bank blue forever, and it has not.
Hmm.
It has changed multiple times. So it's like, it's just, we don't always absorb all of those little differences. And maintaining maintaining consistency does not mean being exactly the same. And I really like that. I think that if you leave some, like, if you accidentally choose the wrong font and it looks really au courant, and you're the only one on the block doing it, and then all of a sudden everybody pulls up the same font and organizes their stuff around that font too, then you're just going to look like one of the crew. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm glad you're coming around to that, because it's a brand should be fluid, even though it's consistent. Consistency does not mean that it can't change. And
Mhm.
yeah, and more changes more regularly means that you don't notice the changes over 10 years, because going from 2000 brand to 2020 brand update is going to be a big shift. But if you do it like every few years, do a little update, then no one's going to even really notice that much. It'll be a
I
nice
find
evolution.
also sometimes it happens with people who have brands that maybe aren't classic, in the sense that, we're talking about trends, right? So what if there was a big design trend the time you did your logo, right? And maybe
Yeah,
it has that feel of what that trend is, and that trend sort of has passed, and then you might update it because
yeah,
that trend has passed and you want to keep fresh. Whereas there are
yeah.
other logos, and typically maybe these are more like text-based logos.
Hmm.
As long as you don't pick some trendy, funky
Hmm.
font,
Yeah.
it will never go out of style. Like, I don't think my
Yeah.
logo, I would ever change it because it's really
Oh,
just a font that
yeah.
says the name and sort of an embellished 72 in the middle with, with a certain shape to it, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't foresee that ever really going out of style or needing to be changed. Whereas
Right.
some logos might have been designed in a time where they actually used a specific style, and that style might go out of trend.
Totally. Absolutely. And that's usually an indication that the brand, whoever did the branding, didn't really get the brand very well. So, for example, a software company that I work with, their logo dated really quickly because they used kind of a computer font at the beginning. So,
Mm.
it ended up looking like the 1980s, which it was, right? Which it was. And
Like
so,
a
and
pixelated kind of feel to it, or like a
yeah, it
typewriter
it
and
was
like an
just
old.
it was a little bit squat. It was a little
Mm,
bit squat, that kind of font that's just a little bit squat. So, yeah, I mean, definitely if you're going to be I prefer working with classic elements because I'm looking for longevity for my clients. My clients are usually really small businesses. They don't have a huge marketing budget, and I'd rather them put their marketing money into technical updates on their websites, content updates, and ads so that they can actually grow their business. So changing fonts and things like that, I want classic things, and I think that's what you've done with your logo. The people that are going to follow the trends are the ones that are going to maybe implement some of the trends for some of their marketing campaigns, and it's like an extension of their brand rather than the brand itself. And then maybe those things like the Friends of Chamber Music, we change out their seasonal brand every single year to suit the season, and always gets an update that way, but their usual logo doesn't change. Youthful brands, if you're doing that, then you probably want to stay more updated than other types of businesses, anything that's fashion oriented, fashion forward, except for stores. Online stores, I think you really just want to highlight the items that you're selling rather than over design the site.
yeah, there's one thing sort of I know is trending popular right now, which is sort of having a product feature section that's,
Mhm.
scrolling through products and things like that. That seems to be something that a lot of people are implementing right now in
Mhm.
specific sections. And so, used properly, like if the bulk of products that you put in this product wheel that scroll are of a certain category or a certain promotion that you're doing, I can get on board with that. But typically in the past, I've not been a fan of scrolling products because you might see one and then it obviously scrolls off the page. It's almost the same type of a feel I get when I thought about, which I'm glad this is almost over. You still see some sites with it, but new sites not so much. Is like where the big hero image. Basically, there was just an image slider of like 5 or 6 images that
Yeah.
kept going
Oh,
back and forth.
yeah, that's
I feel it's sort of
yeah,
similar to that. Like, I hate that
yeah,
process of you see something on screen and then it's gone because the usability factor
yeah.
of that is sort of.
Yeah, it is terrible usability. It's like that's when clients really wanna feature everything and they just put it up in a slider, that's their solution.
Mhm.
I don't recommend sliders for both the usability. I also think unless your imagery within that slider is consistent, it can look like an ad hoc flyer in a way because you've got different styles for each image. It just looks tacky. But the last part of it is terrible for SEO. It's terrible. It makes the whole homepage load very slowly. And so I usually the first thing I do is take those off of people's sites. I try
Yeah, I mean, the
really
more
hard.
the more images you have in the slider, obviously the
Yeah.
page needs to load all of those images. The
Well,
theme
it
factor is not
ranks.
a massive thing for me because done
Yeah.
correctly and only using two or three, um,
Mhm.
they're still it won't degrade the performance of the page. I'm just not a fan of having something leave the screen. It's
Yes, I understand.
I
Yeah,
almost feel
your
it's
your
lazy.
reasons are different than
Lazy
right.
design. where you need to have all of that stuff right at the top, whereas
You
you could
can't
have
decide what
designed
your
the page in
hierarchy
a
is.
better way to have that
Yeah.
information flow down and get away from that slide.
Yeah. Well, it's putting all of the options right at the top, and it's just it doesn't I don't think it really I think it's a user issue, and I also think I don't like the look of it. And but the thing about the speed test is that even if you have an okay user experience where the first image loads quite quickly and so the user has a good experience with they're not waiting for the whole thing,
Mhm.
it still times you from the first minute someone hits the page to the time where your last image loads, and that does add actually quite a bit of time on sometimes, especially if it's a crappy like, there are different quality of slider plugins too, so it's, you know, what was I saying? Like Revolution, that one takes a ton of resources to load sometimes. And I'm talking mostly for the DIY website owners out there when they put out like 6 or 7 in
Yeah,
that thing,
the
just
way I
like,
describe
"Oh."
it to clients when they say, "Oh, can we do a slider with like all of these rotating, features?"
Mhm.
I say, "Okay, how many things do you want to feature?" They're like, "Oh, like 6 to 10 or something." I'm like, "How important is that, fourth to 10th feature?" Because it's going
Yeah,
to take 10 to 15 seconds before,
yeah,
if people wait and watch the thing, like
yeah,
they're not, obviously they're not very important because they're
yeah,
back in the list, through
yep,
like 4 to 10. And so that sort of gets them to be like, okay, they're more on top of like the way it looks or the way it works. Like they think it's cool that it slides, and they don't think
mhm,
of the usability and the actual getting the information in front of the person.
mhm.
Like those slides probably never even get seen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you don't wanna be giving somebody 6 or 7 options on the next action that you want them to take.
Yeah, and sort of gets them to think and go, okay, yeah, you make sense. We can design it a different way. I've got tons of
Yeah.
ways to get clients to move in another direction.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to move
Okay,
on because we got about 4 minutes left to make our half
okay.
hour here. But one of the things I did want to mention about trends is like people have been using pop-ups for a long time or notifications on sites for a long time. But there are more ways to do pop-ups and notifications in a way that actually makes sense to be in use. And we're seeing them being used in a much better way than they used to in the past, where you just like got a pop-up like right away or something and it said something. We're seeing more of these types of pop-ups and notifications being used correctly and in a way that makes sense for sites, and I see those starting to be used a lot more often, again, but properly, not just like, oh my god, I got another pop-up, but it's a pop-up
Yeah,
for a specific reason, and it makes whatever you're doing
yeah,
on your site usable because the pop-up is an interaction of maybe what the customer just did or needed.
yes, yes.
So we're going to see more of that type of a trend this year as well.
I hope so. I still get incensed when I get onto somebody's blog and I haven't even had a chance to look around to see if I like the content, and I'm already asked to sign up to the newsletter.
Hmm.
I just don't understand why that would be seen as a good thing.
Yeah, people have tended to have a pretty negative view of pop-ups in the past because really they were just like something being popped up because the site owner really wanted to get that information in front of them, as opposed to
Mhm,
going through the thoughtful design of presenting their content in a logical way for the customers to be
mhm.
able to get to. what they
Yeah.
want. They just started like, oh, here's what I want to show you. Here it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
people
here's the
got really
pop-up,
thankful
I
to
want
do
this on my site.
it.
It's
Yeah.
true, it's true, it's like it's sliders and pop-ups, it's the same thing. They see it somewhere and they're like, "Can we put this up?" And then they haven't really sometimes they don't even really have the content in mind. People forget that putting out emails in a consistent interval, like in regularly, is part of the rules. It's not you can't just put out one a year and then 6 the next year and then nothing for a year and a half just because you can't get around to it. You have to you have to be consistent. That's part of the anti-spam legislation in Canada.
Mhm. The last thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up was more of a fun one. Was that there's a little bit of a trend to be using sort of fun typefaces, something more playful type of a thing, sort of a lightweight type of a design, and as well as sort of just random fun interactions. I'm not so much on board with that because sometimes I find, when your mouse rolls over something and some fun thing, you know, moves or happens, I find that distracts me. But used in the right context and on the right site, depending on what your brand is, it could have a big
Yeah.
impact to the feel of how people perceive your brand and navigate through your site.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so basically, just to sum up, you want to think about functionality and how you want to design to move people through your site to actually do the things that you want them to do, not just gimmicky stuff. You want to stay on brand. You want to update your brand in little tiny ways every now and again to keep yourself from getting stagnant. You don't want to be too trendy unless you are one of the industries or companies that would benefit from being au courant, but follow the lead on your brand guidelines before you pick up a new font. And definitely campaigns can be a little bit more fun because they're shorter lived.
Hmm.
That's what I have to say. Was
Perfect.
that a good summary?
Yeah, that was good, and we've hit our time. So
Perfect. So what's
yeah,
happening next week? Do we
well,
know? I don't.
yeah, next week is our monthly wrap up, so
Oh
everyone can
yeah, that's right.
look forward
Yeah,
to basically all of the current stuff that's been going on in digital marketing this month.
great. So if you're viewing this on any other channel other than our Facebook group, Cyberpunk Geek Marketing Mixer, that's where you want to find us if you'd like to join us there. If not, we'll see you here next week, same time. Have a great week, rest of your
Thanks,
week.
Rina. Bye, everyone.
The conversation never stops in our Facebook group, Cyberpunk Geeks. Join us at facebook.com/groups/cyberpunk geeks to ask your questions, meet new friends, and learn even more about search, social, and websites.